Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have another fantastic show for you this evening. We have Karol Olesiak, and he was on the USS Reagan back in 2004. Had a very strange sighting. It was more strange by the reactions of everyone than the sighting, I think. But anyway, we're going to be talking to him. And this week's blog by Charles Lear is the second part of UFO abduction research gone sideways, part 2, where he gets into the crazy stuff that happened with Emma Woods and the allegations and things like that. But anyway, that's the last of his series. I think he's written 5 blogs on that. Another great one by him. And let's see. I don't think I have anything else to announce. I do appreciate everyone that helps out with the show, and anyone can do that. All you have to do is go over to the website, podcastufo.com. We also have a pretty active Facebook page. I think there's 20 some odd thousand people that sometimes interact, and just look that up on Facebook, Podcast UFO. And our guest, I'm bringing him in now. Karol, welcome.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you, Martin. Big fan.
Great. Yes, great. Thank you. I remember hearing about you in this case. Dave Beatty alerted me to it, but you've had it out there for a while. You published something out there to kind of get the word out. So how long has this been, this story? Did you feel comfortable putting it out there after the USS Nimitz case was out there everywhere?
That's correct. There's my shipmates, quite a few of them have been asking me to write about it for a while. And well, I mean, as much as I appreciate the topic, I was doing different kinds of writing having to do with activism. And I felt like writing about the UAP topic at the time would have detracted from what I was writing about, which was an anti-war topic. And now, after 2017, these two topics have collided.
Yeah, in a way they have. You're right. And what do you think in general about, the hard look, I have to say, about what's going on in the military when it comes to, they call it UAP?
I have a friend who just retired from Space Force, also had a UAP encounter. He told me that, he wants to get a hold of Dave as well. But, no, people, this is a topic. It's crazy how similar these two topics are, like the topic of renewable energy, for instance, and the topic of UAPs. There's certain people that won't think about the topic of renewable energy at all. It's hokey, it's fairy dust, it's this, it's that, and it just doesn't fit into their personality. So whether you're inside of the military or outside, I feel like you encounter that. People that say that that's just not me.
Yeah. Well, I think, from what I've seen, the reaction to the renewables and things like that is it's a hard arc to get from where we are over to that and convince, people in setting up the infrastructure to make it all work. But once it's in place, then we're going to be in really good shape. But it's a hard, it's going to cost some money and it's going to cause environmental damage to get to a place to stop the environmental damage. Well,
the biggest purchasers of environmental, sorry, I mean to interrupt you. The biggest purchasers of environmental products is the military, but it's convincing the personnel to use the environmental products. And, because in terms of delivering gas into a war zone, you don't want to lose lives in delivering gas. So this is obviously something the military has always been thinking about. But it's completely off the topic of UAPs. But it is the same because it's kind of a mentality thing, that it's like, I love my gas, I love my truck, or I love the way my mentality is already structured and I'm not trying to mess with it, which I'm not sure that's reasonable. Sanity is not overrated.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about now. Tonight, I'd like to be able to talk about both encounters that you had and the latter one. But the one that is really fascinating and why you're here to speak about, I'd like for you to just go through and tell us, what happened.
Okay. So I went into the military right after 9/11, and I ended up in boot camp in April of 2002, and I commissioned the Ronald Reagan, and so I was a plank owner on the Ronald Reagan.
Oh, wow.
And so I was one of the first quartermasters. I struck out into the rate, and I was one of the first quartermasters to be trained and to be working on that ship. And one particular evening, I relieved one of my shipmates, and I was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "What do you mean you don't know?" She's like, "I don't know." She's like, "Does the officer of the deck know?" I guess, you know? I'm like, "Okay." And then just took off. I'm like, "Okay, so there's this orb above the flight deck, right?" From this is my perspective. There's other perspectives in this, but from in my perspective, there's this orb there. But I've been brainwashed into, if the officer of the deck is concerned, then I'm concerned. It's my whole relationship with authority had kind of changed. And so I it was just it was like the Truman Show, kind of,
Huh?
except with a UAP, which is an apt metaphor, I think. So this thing was hovering there above the flight deck. There seemed to be a complete delineation on the bridge between officers and enlisted.
I'm just
And
popping this up for the people on YouTube. This
no,
was
no, no, that's
something I
right.
just found on the internet. And so I guess I have to ask you, and sorry to interrupt you here, and I want you to keep going, but is that kind of what you think you saw? It's very similar to that?
It's very similar. It's very similar. Uh, I would say that there was another. If you look up the Sun had a mock-up that they did of their own, and I thought that one was. If you look up my name and the Sun, I believe that one was closer. Even though I love Dave's as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Okay. So continue on. And again, I apologize for
No
interrupting there.
worries.
Yeah.
So on the bridge, I guess I have to explain what a quartermaster does. A quartermaster is works directly for the ship's navigator. There's a limited amount of department heads on a ship, and the navigator runs his own department. So we're in charge of making sure the ship is positioned in a way so the planes can take off and then land. And during flight operations, and then we're in charge of making sure the ship knows where it's going in other circumstances. And sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But there's quartermasters, and then there's bosun mates, and they're like they have a number of different jobs on the ship having to do with the anchor and a lot of the traditional duties. These are mostly traditional rates. There's a lot of operations people, and then there's officers, which consist mostly of helicopter pilots and airplane jet pilots, and some of them retired pilots, whatever. And there seemed to be, in terms of, I mentioned backstage that the miracle of Our Lady Fatima seemed seemed to kind of be the same as the experience that I'm having here with this orb that's hovering above us, because some people seem to see it, some people seem to not see it, and some people are excited, and I've asked myself and asked other people, and I asked who I had relieved why we weren't at general quarters. I mean, for
And
me,
what does general quarters mean exactly?
general quarters is a combat readiness procedure.
Uh huh.
When the ship is in danger, when there is something unknown. something I'd mentioned in the interviews that I did with Dave, and if I go off tangent and need to come back, I'd appreciate the help.
Yeah.
But something I had mentioned to Dave is that we do darkened ship, which isn't, I'm sure that's not classified, but it's that, you know, all ships do this. We're all afraid of somebody noticing us in the middle of the ocean. And I'd always
Mhm.
ask myself this philosophical questions like, what is the greatest navy in the world afraid of in the middle of the ocean?
Hmm.
You know, pre-USS Cole, maybe. I don't know. But it had always, you know, I had always wondered, you know, what is it that we're afraid of? What is it that's unknown? 70% of this world is ocean, you know,
Right.
and we really know nothing about it, you know,
Right. Mhm.
but we do have the strongest navy in the world at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so the officers seem like they're having a party. And the bosun mates seem like they're having a mental breakdown. You know, this is what I'm observing. You know what I mean? Half the bridge seems like they're freaking out, and the other half seems way too calm. And I might fall into the category of somebody that was too calm. You know what I mean? Like in retrospect, like thinking about it again, like I can say, okay, it was because of the brainwashing. Oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's because I wasn't trying to draw attention to myself. But at the same time, it's like, why the hell was I so calm?
Hmm.
You know?
But you were kind of following, like you said, the brainwashing they do is, you kind of look to your superiors for any type of reaction, aren't you? I mean, isn't that what part of it is?
Yeah, totally. My relationship with authority was completely different before I went into the military as opposed to after I went into the military. And my relationship now, which is, you know, I'm very defiant against authority at this stage of my life, which I think is very healthy. It's the
Mhm.
American way. Um,
But yeah, I mean, I find here's the depiction that I found. That is that the more of the correct of what you.
yes, yes.
This was in the Sun, the publication, the Sun, and it does look like the Sun. And I think I mentioned to you um, in off camera before the show started that we had someone in the military on a while back.
Kevin
Um,
Day?
nope. Boy, his name is slipping, escaping me right now. Mario Woods, and this was over a nuclear facility, and he said it looked like a large sun. Was right over the weapons. So it's really was really something, and he had missing time and all that, and that's another thing. Of course, I'm going to ask
Well,
you a lot
that's
of
what I
questions.
wonder about Derek Smith, he was one of the bosun mates that's included
Mhm.
in my article, the original article, and also have been interview. Okay, I don't want to say, I don't think Dave actually did the interview with Derek. I know he did an interview with Patrick Goki. I think Dave used an interview that I had done with Derek, but you know, Derek's experience is so short that I'm wondering, because my experience is so long, how, you know, like, and it's the same thing with Patrick. Patrick sees it moving. I don't see it moving, you know, like, but I trust these guys. I worked with Patrick for years, and he's one of the few people you know, and I trust Derek too. They're not, and Derek was definitely one of the people that was pressuring me to write about this because um, man, we had gone through this experience, and then the reflection process about the experience is actually the thing, right? Because yes, the experience is weird, and the experiencers are behaving weird. But what happens to me over 15 years is I think about it as if I had taken some sort of psychedelic, and I was reflecting on the experiences I had on this psychedelic. The thing is, you're not allowed to do drugs in the military, you know.
But okay, so this thing, the people you're witnessing this with, outside, you're outside or you're inside?
I'm inside. I'm inside.
Okay.
There's bulletproof glass, and you know, if you've seen the movie Top Gun, This is a
Mhm.
Top Gun situation. The Top Gun flight, the flight bridge is right above us. We are right. Is that a picture of the Reagan?
Well, I googled it. I was hoping it was. I know it's isn't it number
I
76?
think that is the Reagan. I think that's the Reagan in the Straits of Magellan, which I navigated. It's one of my claims to fame, which is like you. I think it was the first time a large aircraft carrier like that had ever traversed a small area like that, and it was
Wow.
the navigation detail was like 30 hours long, you know, and
Jeez.
it
Wow.
was
Wow. That
yeah.
must have been beautiful too to go through there. Um, so yeah, I mean the reaction of the people. This is what when I listened to another interview that you did with Dave Beatty. That was my takeaway of the strangeness of this thing is the reactions and like there's really nothing going on and you're launching. You're catapulting these. What are they? F-18s or what were they at that time? F's.
Super Hornets, F-22s.
F.
Or
Oh, F.
no, F-22s are Raptors, sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, I it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a
So
while, but it was the ship was built to outfit the Super Hornet, which was the newest
nice.
in the arsenal for the military industrial complex,
Yeah.
if you can guess where my political leanings lie.
So these things are being launched, and the thing is just sitting there, which is very. I mean, the fact that you were launching these jets off of that thing while this thing was sitting there is
Right.
baffling. And I mean, and why you're not in some type of alert situation, and why no one's talking about it. Why none of the officers are talking about that? That's
We're
the
talking
strange.
about it afterwards. One of the things I mentioned in Dave's interview was that um, the Bull, who was the senior, when I started writing about it, he was the senior commissioned officer, the lowest ranking senior commissioned officer, and it's kind of they wear a cowboy hat. It's ceremonial, but he was on watch that night, and I asked him what happened in the galley, in the officers' galley, where they ate the day after, and he's like, nothing. They didn't give a fuck. Sorry. They did not care. They did not
Yeah,
care. I'll try to watch my language.
that's all right. So yeah, that that's just I'm just totally baffled by that part of it because I mean to me I just see this thing was actually pacing along with you, right? You're
How
going
many
about
other
20
things are
knots.
like this in our world where there are things that people just cumulatively ignore, that they just things happen, they're like, I don't know what that was, I don't care, we'll just like we'll chalk it up to whatever, like I
Well, it's kind of like a sheep mentality in a way because if like people are looking at each other for reactions, and if the officers are acting like it's no big deal, that's going to be contagious as well.
I
Unless
wasn't trying to make myself ridiculous either,
hmm,
you know not to say that the UFO research is ridiculous, it's just that once you put yourself into that arena, it might make it harder to go into other things. And I think that's how people think about it. And it's sad that people do think about it that way. But um, I don't know. Dostoevsky has a story called The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, you know, and it's this idea that somebody can have this ridiculous dream of a perfect world, but when um, they can't actually make it happen in reality. It's kind of like these. So I've gotten to listen to a bunch of your podcasts, and I got to listen to a couple of the Jacques Vallée ones, and you know, he was talking about his books, and he's like, "These things are real. We know these things are real," and it's like this idea of real might be the problem.
hmm,
There might be a category of things that exist in between real or unreal, or even beyond that, like, I guess this word supernatural is so kitschy, but I guess the word is supernatural, and that's the word we've been using forever. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I think one of the things that Valet does uh, say at some point is, and which I agree totally, is that, we may not even understand what we're looking at. If, I mean, we may not even be able to understand what these things are. Some of them are, and they all could be different, different things. But
I do think that there is, in the way that they move, regardless of whether they're cigar shaped or saucer shaped or whatever, it's in the way that they move that that is the similarity, and that is the thing that makes us feel something, that this otherworldly feeling where we're convinced that that can't be from here, but I don't, that could be some sort of trickster mechanism too, it's like, I'm pretty sure the experience that I had wasn't a trick, you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know. It's there might be, again, in this divide between real and unreal, there might also be this thing between trick and miracle, right? So I started thinking about this in terms of another philosophy experiment, that you have, say, manufactured crop circles. These fraudsters decide that they're going to manufacture crop circles, and then they're going to convince a bunch of UFO enthusiasts that these are real, and the UFO enthusiasts believe that they're real, and they come, and then later the fraudsters, they go in the papers and they say, ha ha, we tricked them, blah blah blah. And yet the UFO enthusiasts are like, still won't believe it. But what if the whole interaction between the enthusiasts and the fraudsters is contact of some sort, that these two groups are being compelled by some force, but I thought about this in terms of the Philadelphia experiment, because that's a classic
Oh, yeah.
example of a hoax. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, in my studies, there's no such thing as a complete hoax. Everything comes from somewhere. But anyway, going back to this specific experience, we had talked about it for years. Me and Patrick actually ended up working together on when Occupy Wall Street started, because I was going to school in New York, and it seemed like our movement and our time. And I can't say that seeing this UAP encounter didn't influence all of that, and didn't, because I was pretty arbitrary before I went into the military. I didn't care about, all of these things. I was, civics. I was late to I was late to the class for civics. Like there's something great about the American classroom, where you can get that lesson sometimes if you have a good professor, a good teacher somewhere along the way that will teach you the importance of civics. But I was 32 before I understood the importance of civics, even after I had served.
So there were people. Were there other people saying that they saw other orbs that were moving? Did I hear that?
I think I was mistaken in the interview, in my reading, because Patrick had sent me a write-up of his encounter, and I had just copy and pasted it and put it into my article, and I think I had misread it. I had misread it that he saw more than one orb. He had seen the same orb in different positions on the ship, because the way that the bosun mates worked is they rotated positions. They're trained lookouts, and this is something that your listeners should probably know too. Everybody in these positions has had extensive trainings on how to spot different kinds of aircraft, especially the lookouts, because that's their job, and how to identify, how to tell how far away they are, and yeah, yeah. So this isn't like a civilian sighting, so to speak. This is their
Mhm.
job.
Now, did anyone try to look? I know you have those, I forget what they call them, big eyes or something like that, whatever those really powerful binoculars. Did anyone
Derek,
try to,
I believe Derek looked through the big eyes.
and he looked
Uh,
at this object?
I think he tried. I think they tried. I don't know that they saw anything specific through the big eyes that they hadn't seen with again, this thing is like right on top of us. You don't need the big eyes to see it.
Hmm. Wow. And how many people would you think actually saw this?
I had been a little, I had exaggerated a little in my interview with Dave. I'd said like 1,000. I think I was feeling a little ornery. Definitely a couple hundred, definitely a couple hundred, you know, there's at least 30 people to 45 people working between the two different bridge teams, whether it's air ops and the navigation detail. There's two floors. So, about 15 to 20 people on each floor. And then you have the flight deck, which is all different colored shirts based
Mhm.
on what they do, whether it's fuel or this or that. And, so you need, in order to conduct flight operations, you need a lot of people,
Yes.
so
Oh,
couple
absolutely. I bet.
hundred, couple hundred.
Uh-huh. Now, what about there would be no way to find out if this thing ever showed up on radar or anything like that, right?
The radar is right next to me. I didn't see it. So my
Oh, you
chart
mean
table is my chart table, and then right next to me is the bull who I'd mentioned before, and he's working with operations. But he's aware of it, right? So they're not seeing it on radar. They're not seeing it on radar, but the fact that they're not seeing it on radar doesn't mean anything because it's right on top of us. It
yeah.
not only is it right on top of us, I have no idea when it got there. You know what I mean? Like, uh, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, nothing. If anything would be, I don't think anything that close to us is going to show up on radar.
Oh, geez, I never thought about
I
that.
don't. I'm not a. That wasn't my job. That wasn't my job. But I don't think so.
Well, what was the buzz like after I talked to, people that were on the Princeton and the Nimitz, and there was a lot of buzz going on about it. A lot of teasing and stuff like that. But to say David Fravor, I guess they were teasing him a bit. But what was that like afterwards?
I think I remember Fravor from Navigation Details. I think his squadron was with us for a while. I can't say that for sure, but I'm pretty sure I remember because I used to sit in Navigation Details, and I remember his face
Hmm,
giving speeches about what I think the Black Aces, is that what it was? Uh,
I'm not
one of
sure.
the aces,
Yeah.
but um, like I said, so I can gauge the officer reaction based on what the bull told me, and that was they didn't really talk about it at all. A complete ignoring. Like the reaction while I was seeing these guys on the bridge was having a good time looking at it. I think they were looking at it, and then um and then he said that in the galley afterwards, nobody really talked about it because nobody's in a hurry to make themselves ridiculous, you know.
Hmm.
Um, which is sad.
Yeah.
But the
Well,
in the enlisted spectrum, it's a little different. There's rumors flying around. You know what I mean? Like there's people that are lying. There's people that are saying that they saw it and they didn't see it. They were
uh,
nowhere. They weren't on, um yeah, it's a strange world we live in, of
well, that seemed to have, that
of
happened. I
all
don't
the
know.
things that happen. But I think Valet talks about it in his book when he's talking about the Philadelphia experiment of how rumors move on ships, and I
Mm,
found that to be something that really spoke to me because you could really do a scientific study for it. In studying
yeah.
fiction, the ship is a representation for society.
Mm,
Anytime a writer writes about the ship, what he's doing is writing about society. You know, he's making a statement. Even if he doesn't know that, he's making a statement.
Yeah. Here's Gerald has a question. Did it make any noise? I know you were on the inside, but I don't know if anyone on the outside heard anything.
With our loud Super Hornets, again, I'm gonna do everything in relation to the Super Hornets, and those things are loud as hell. So even if it made a noise, we wouldn't have heard it.
Right. And what about
So the
way to
approximate
judge the
size
size?
is
Mhm.
I think it was about the size of the Super Hornet without the wings. If you were to take the Super Hornet without the wings, that's my
And that's
approximation.
like 40, 50 feet, something like that.
40, 50 feet. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just throwing the number out there. I don't really know. But so what was the ending of this thing? Do you happen to know? Did someone see it vanish all of a sudden, or it was there your entire watch? Did you ever speak to anyone? Well, the person relieving you, how did that?
That's the
What was the
sad
conversation?
thing. That's the sad thing is knowing that you're the kind of person that left watch without knowing because you were tired. You know what I mean? I was working 16-hour days, but like
Wow.
I had this sinking feeling as I was walking down to my rack. Somebody had relieved me and kind of in the same kind of relief process that I got. What is that? I don't know. Does the officer of the deck know? I don't know. You know, like,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean,
But I mean, the officer on the deck, someone had to tell the officer on the deck, right? I mean, that's just a given. Or whose job is it to tell to
it's
tell that
waking up
person?
the captain. That's the endeavor, right?
Oh,
Nobody
yeah,
cares about the officer of the deck, really. The officer of the deck is some lower level department head. It's
yeah.
should we wake the captain? Again, it's like the general quarters question. Why didn't we call general quarters? Well, first we would have had to wake the captain, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nobody wants to wake the captain to tell him that there's a UFO, you know.
Wow.
What
But
if
what
it's
if he
gone?
heard
What if
after?
he's one of the ones that doesn't see it? What if it's gone by the time he gets there?
But what if he hears about? Well, you said it didn't get entered in the
He's
log,
on
which
my
is another
Facebook.
bizarre.
I should contact him.
Yeah,
By the
yeah,
way,
you should now and see what happens. But if it's not in the logbook, so no one. It's possible that no one said anything to him the next day.
I really doubt anybody had the cojones to do that.
Jeez.
This is the part of the brainwashing that's really profound.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty confident person and I've done a lot of public speaking, but you know, performing in front of the captain after you went through this boot camp where they teach you about honor and discipline and all that stuff, and suddenly you're face to face with the captain, no matter who you are, you get a little shaken. So
How
I can
about that?
understand why nobody wanted to tell the captain that there was a UAP.
Wow. Wow. But I mean,
I didn't want to tell the captain. One time they wanted me to do a PMS, preventive maintenance system, and I felt like something wasn't quite right, and I just didn't want to do it. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be the one to present the information in some sort of,
but wouldn't you think that, like, if he found out like the next day, hey, why didn't you wake me up? Could that be a possibility? Could that be a reaction like that?
the first time I had ever really encountered the vernacular of what are you smoking was when I talked to a recruiter. You know what I mean? He tried to pass me the fake joint, like, and it was that's how military people are. You know what I mean? If it's not
Hmm.
tangible and it's not, the enemy, then again, you have to ask yourself if the policy of ignoring these things is better than shooting at them.
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
think what I've heard is that in various war situations, they're showing up on different battlefields in the world, and people are shooting at them. And again, this is word of mouth from Jeremy Corbell,
Hmm.
but it's not like, I don't know. Who knows? I don't know what to believe, what not to believe. My view in terms of intelligence is I know what I saw, right? But I know that there is information and then there is disinformation, and you're hard pressed to find any information, and you have to decide in the moment which you're being presented with, whether even this experience is it disinformation or is it misinformation, even like the I don't know. And then the idea of the government staging a fake UFO invasion always comes up into the as a justification for war, always comes into the pipelines as well. So
Hmm. Hmm. So this we talked about this earlier, and Judy wanted to know where the jets landing and taking off while the orbiter was present, and I believe that it
yes,
was exactly the case, right? Yeah,
yes.
and yeah, that is one of the most baffling parts. To me, it just seems like the possibility of it being a danger. I'm sure if it reacted in some type of aggressive way, everything would have changed immediately, I would imagine.
I mean, didn't see any armaments on it. Me walking away from this and I mean, I've had a lot of reflection on it. It's like if these things wanted to be a danger to us, we'd probably be screwed, you
Yeah, I would.
know. And I
I
think they've been in our history for a long time with Foo Fighters and whatnot, and yeah, I think they're like me. I think they're anti-war.
Well, I mean that there's something to that. I mean when they have you know disarmed warheads, and all the way back in 1962, I think it was.
Yeah.
Really makes you wonder about all that. So that's very very much a possibility. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit because time's been flying by here, and I want to hear about your 2015 um, encounter when you were walking your dogs. What happened at that point?
So
Unless there's
fast.
anything unless there's anything else you want to wrap up on this particular sighting.
No, no. I mean, I have yeah, I have a Substack in which there's an auto fiction account of the story. If your listeners would like to check it out.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, I can link that in the show notes,
yeah.
everyone. So I'll be happy to do that. And that's I'm sure that's what Kevin Day did as well. He wrote a fiction
I've,
about.
I want to read. I listened to your interview with Kevin Day specifically, and I think
Mhm.
maybe, and this is the conclusion that I came to, maybe what we're left with is, the fiction, and how we process it. That
Mhm.
I'm not a big data person. I'm not sure that an accumulation of data is going to get us closer to understanding what it is that we're dealing with.
Hmm.
People are in such a hurry to take it apart, figure out how it works, and not why it works. Anyway,
Hmm.
we can move on to 2015. So, I moved to Detroit to work in renewable energy. Why I know that the subject of UAPs is similar to the subject of renewable energy. And one night I was hanging out with a friend of mine. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were in Clawson, Michigan, and we're just walking around having a good time. And suddenly, we see about 30 of these things. And now, are they 30? I'm not sure that they're 30 little suns. We're further away than I would have been on the ship, but they're like above people's houses, and when I wrote in my Substack about that they're engaged in a janitorial function, it's that what it looks like when something is exploring and it hasn't been somewhere before, as opposed to something that is engaged in something routine that it engages with on a regular basis. The movement of these things over people's houses seemed very routine, you
Huh.
know? again, in the way that they moved, and the way that they moved was, again, this kind of feeling of the otherworldly, and again, my friend that I saw it with, we first we see these things, and then at some point, I'm sure we've made contact because one of these things is following us to his house. At least this is my perception of it. We go to his house and we're sitting out there and we're staring at it. And there's definitely a conclusion to this encounter where it just leaves, But like we try to wake up his wife. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to see it. She's like, you have what? I'm going back to sleep. But, the day afterwards, I'm like, oh my God. So I have to, at least in this situation, I have a friend there with me. And I was like, did we just see what I thought we just saw? And he's like, yes, that was real. That was real. That happened. And I'm like, oh my God. I didn't have that on the Reagan because you're almost afraid to talk about it, but like, but again, I had this experience with him where he's like, this feeling of the otherworldly that I've been carrying with me ever since, it just seemed to kind of dissipate from him very quickly, where he's like, oh, the next day it's all about how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to meet ends meet? Which is what all people have to work, the things that we all have to deal with. But to me, that feeling of the otherworldly is like some sort of high, where you're like suddenly impacted, almost like profoundly, But again, I'm not sure that there isn't some sort of trickster mechanism at play here as well, that I felt intoxicated. That's what I took away from that experience. And
So
when I look back at the experience on the Reagan, I was intoxicated too, just in the opposite way. It was the ultimate sobriety. I was so calm. Why? I'd had a dream when I went back to my mom's house almost a prophetic dream before I moved to Detroit. I stopped at my mom's house and I had this vivid dream. How you have those dreams and you just remember them forever because they're so vivid. So I walked out in my mom's backyard and I see a miniature UFO. And, it's a very classical miniature UFO, but I have the right reaction. When you're a child and you want to scream, but you can't, you know what I mean? That is the right reaction to seeing something otherworldly, right?
And this was the dream you had?
That is true in our human instinct, right? Like that. So why in one instinct am I ultimately sober and then other instant I'm ultimately intoxicated by these things, Again, these are things that I've been reflecting on for years. I definitely think maybe that there is a phenomenon at play that we in our nascent stage of understanding are affected by, but we can't necessarily understand it. And maybe we're left with fictionalizing it, mythologizing it. I don't know. I don't want to go against the hard science people that are looking for hard data so they can break the rules of physics, but I think it's important to embrace a kind of meditative path where you're actually thinking about what you're getting yourself into in these processes. I think in our initial interviews, we had talked about Tommy knockers, which when I listened to your interviews with Kevin Day, that really the Tommy knockers idea really came into play for me again. I'm like,
for the one that doesn't know, the Tommy knockers were when this thing was buried under the ground, right? For thousands of years or millions of years or something. Or am I thinking of, I read the book, but it was so long ago.
I read it when I was in middle school as well. But essentially, it deals with So the benefit of a classical education is one of the first things that my professor told me is that before the Renaissance, nobody had their own ideas. All ideas either came from muses or they came from gods. This idea that this modern idea that we have an individual idea is an invention, like it's not a part of the it's not a part of the human story. We've rewritten the human story where we have our own ideas, and the whole idea of intellectual property is based on this Renaissance idea of ownership of things.
Right. Which is,
So
it is a
in
concept.
terms of what Stephen King is getting at is that these people are getting ideas for these inventions, and all the inventions are turning into these torture devices.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. All right. But he did have a book that I read a long time ago where they found this. There was a UFO that had crashed and it was down inside the Earth, down below this property. That was, I forget what that was called. But I want to go back to your sighting though. Just can you describe? I'm trying to figure out what you mean exactly. Like it seemed like whatever they were doing was routine, and like they were almost like janitorial or something like that. And what exactly do you mean by what were you observing that made you feel that that's what you were seeing?
Well, I was observing these things floating over people's houses. I'm not saying that they were making any kind of contact with people's houses because I don't know. I know that one of them, followed us back to our house. So to explain the janitorial function, I used to stand a lot of watch. So you do a lot of observing. If I was observing people that were there, if I was observing a group of people that have been there for the first time, as opposed to a group of people who had been there lots of times, that's what I'm getting at. That it didn't seem
Oh, I
like
see.
these lights that were hovering over people's houses had just gotten there, and this was some sort of novel encounter. It was as if, it was a regular night at 1 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't even hidden,
Yeah.
it was just,
And would you describe these things as similar to what you saw before, like orbs?
yeah, yeah. The idea of lights in the sky always comes back. What I saw was lights in the sky. I've never had any other experiences besides lights in the sky. That I
Hmm.
can conjure here for this interview.
And when you were looking out at these, say, 30 or so, whatever they were, um, they seemed to hover in place except for the one that seemed to follow you home.
No, they were moving. It was by the way that they're moving that you know that gives me this feeling of otherworldliness that feels kind of intoxicating. So they're all moving around at some point. But even though these things are out there, my friend wants to go home. That's definitely, another thing. Like kind of like me on watch, I was working 16-hour days. Lights in the sky are great, but they're not going to help me wake up tomorrow. But
Yeah.
but I'm the kind of person that would have stayed out there all night looking at these things.
Hmm. And when you saw the thing take off, would you say it took off at a rapid speed or how?
Yes,
And
it went straight up. It
straight
went
up.
straight up.
Oh, that's pretty key. And that's something
Because
you do hear
what I
about.
was thinking about in terms of Michigan is all these lakes, and that
Hmm.
my intuition is like they have to be coming out of the water. But when this thing was done with us, it went straight up.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And yeah, that is one of the characteristics that you do hear a lot of people talk about. Thing just shooting straight up and fast. And obviously, I mean, I'm assuming that there was no sound either.
No, we didn't hear any sound that night.
Yeah. Well, it's all so fascinating. and you don't. There was no way that you could have had any missing time. I know we talked briefly about that earlier, but you said this was about 1 a.m. and everything checked out as far as the time goes. Like if you looked at your watch and it was like 1:30 in the morning after that, or
I mean, we were up until early in the morning, I think. We were out on the back porch. We were out when we got back to his house. We were just laying out on the back porch, just looking at it, above
oh
us.
yeah, yeah, wow. And no,
But no, I don't think there was missing time. I think the thing that's weird for me is I don't know what parts of my life are me having a meeting with someone, you know what I mean? Like after you have an experience like this, you start to wonder about other experiences you have and whether they're connected to this,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what happened to me, especially after this one, because I was, in a lot of ways, these things show up when I need a sign, when I need
Mm.
when I need a little extra to push on, because it's been a hard journey. I know that Kevin Day talked about this, the idea of possibly getting some compensation for injuries that we've received from these experiences. And I completely understand that, because as a disabled veteran, I understand how few things are covered. You know,
Mhm.
I'd like to just mention the idea of a non-state actor instead of this idea of aliens, because in terms of sickness, the Havana syndrome has come up recently too.
Mhm.
And the government put out something really strange, that they were going to cover it medically, but they can be sure that it wasn't a foreign government. What the hell does that mean? Because for the rest of us, we need an act of Congress to be passed in order for them to cover something. How does it automatically, they proved this Havana syndrome is not a foreign government and they're going to cover it?
That is really bizarre. Now, I don't know. Are you familiar with the Rendlesham Forest incident?
You'll have to remind me.
Yeah. Well, that happened back in 1980, and it was on a military base in England,
Oh
American
yeah, I
military
know.
base.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, John Burroughs was covered for medical insurance. He had a lawyer, and he actually was able to, he had heart trouble that he was relating to his incident. And he actually won, which is pretty rare. So, but that, I mean, that's a whole different type of situation, I believe. From what his exposure was, I'm not really sure what other people's are that if you were exposed to anything or not. I don't know.
I'm interested in veterans getting compensation all around. I'm already 100% disabled, and so
Hmm.
there's nowhere to go after 100%.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
can't compensate me anymore. But and so for something like this, so I have MS, but for something like this, people are going to have a hard time getting compensation, and
Yeah.
I guess we have to start working on it now. You know, uh,
Mhm.
Kevin Day was talking about education. You know,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Well,
I don't know how to educate people. I don't know how to educate people on something like this. I'm a I favor classical education.
uh-huh. Hey, we were out of time already, and it went really fast. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for your service, and we'll be talking soon. And I
Thank you
will
very
put in
much,
the show
sir. I
notes.
appreciate your time, and you're doing great work.
Great. Thank you very much. I will put your blog in the show notes for anyone could take a look at it.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right. Take care. All right, everyone. Sorry we ran short on time. We'll be back next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky. Thank you all.